Business Review, your daily source for the most critical stories in the financial world. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.
Hundreds of workers burning tires and shouting war blockaded Nissan Motor Company's Barcelona plant after the Japanese car maker announced it would shut it from December as part of a global restructuring plan to slash costs. Workers called for European support to the industry of the Barcelona plant and said they believed it was not fair that the company was keeping other plants like the Sunderland plant in England open and not supporting countries under the European umbrella like Spain. The Spanish government, which said in January after meeting officials from the Renault-Nissan alliance that jobs at the plant were guaranteed, said it would do everything it can to overturn Nissan's decision. The decision is a blow for Spain at the time when unemployment is spiking and a steep recession is looming because of the coronavirus crisis, and the main opposition party criticized the leftist coalition government for failing the Nissan workers. The closure of the plant and several facilities nearby also highlights the challenges car makers face as they try to cut costs and revive demand following the global health crisis. The plant and the nearby facilities employ 3,000 workers, and the closures could indirectly affect up to 25,000 jobs, unions say. The car industry accounts for about 10% of Spain's gross domestic product, according to Producers Association ANFAC. But the chairman of Nissan in Europe told reporters that the plant had a low utilization rate and output would not have improved even by assembling new models. Nissan said it would slash its production capacity by a fifth to help reduce its fixed costs by 300 billion yen, as it looks to become smaller and more cost-efficient after posting its first loss in 11 years.
Just in time for Pentecost, Vienna's famous five-star hotel Sacher on May the 29th opened its doors once again. Guests will now be able to spend the night in one of the luxurious rooms and suites, but the hotel management has revived also another idea for the reopening of the hotel. Some of the rooms and suites have been temporarily converted in chambres séparées, Sacher's vice CEO Matthias Winkler said. Far away from other guests, 4 people and children can have breakfast, lunch, or dinner there. A butler serves the meal, including Austrian classics such as Tappelspitz, Wiener Schnitzel, or of course, a piece of the original Sacher cake. Like many hotels around the world, the famous house in Vienna has suffered massive sale losses due to the pandemic, and it'll take years to recover from this, according to Winkler.
French restaurants and cafes, eager for news about the end of their COVID-19 shutdown, warned they would still need government support even after reopening, predicting a sluggish return of customers. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe detailed the next phase of coronavirus restrictions in a speech on May 28, with the industry hoping for announcements about a gradual reopening of cafes and restaurants. Restaurants at a protest on the banks of the River Seine in Paris acknowledged state aid had helped keep them afloat through the lockdown, notably a furlough scheme for some 1 million workers in their industry, but they said more was needed. In a joint statement, 11 industry associations urged the government to drop social charges for 2020 and to extend furlough contributions for as long as social distancing rules prevent restaurants operating at full capacity. They also called on telecoms companies and utilities to reduce charges and want municipalities to provide more space in public areas to compensate for social distancing rules indoors. Printemps department store in Paris reopened its doors on May 28th after more than 2 months of closure, welcoming masked shoppers who did not hesitate to swipe their credit cards for big-ticket items such as Louis Vuitton handbags and Alexander McQueen sneakers. Pierre Paleri, general director of Printemps' flagship store on Boulevard Haussmann, said sales had taken a hit due to the loss of international tourists, who account for 50% of revenue, and domestic tourists who are barred from traveling more than 100 kilometers due to continued lockdown measures. Some brands are offering up to 40% off to get the summer inventory off the shelves. Airly said it's important that they are able to reopen quickly and relaunch their activity, even if they know that they will not have the same revenues as last year. The number of customers is expected to be down to about 8,000 shoppers per day, Hillary said, about a quarter of normal traffic. French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe said on Thursday France was making progress in its fight against COVID-19 outbreak and unveiled steps to further relax restrictions, allowing beaches, restaurants and parks to reopen across the country. UN Chief Antonio Guterres called for debt relief to be offered to all developing and middle-income countries amid the coronavirus pandemic, and urged the International Monetary Fund to consider boosting global liquidity by issuing a new allocation of its special drawing rights currency. Guterres told a high-level UN meeting on how to handle the pandemic's economic fallout. The alleviating crushing debt cannot be limited to the least developed countries, adding that it must be extended to all developing and middle-income countries that request forbearance as they lose access to financial markets. The world's developing economies, already struggling with a rapidly growing debt burden, must now confront a record global downturn, plummeting prices for their oil and commodities exports and weakening local currency. The oil price drop has also hit some middle-income countries particularly hard. Guterres said that many developing and middle-income countries are highly vulnerable and already in debt distress, or will soon become so due to the global recession. The group of 20 major economies, including China and the Paris Club of Government Lenders in April, offered to suspend bilateral debt payments by the 77 poorest countries for the rest of the year. So far, only 22 of the countries have requested to receive the forbearance. The new coronavirus outbreak, which first emerged in China late last year, has infected millions and killed hundreds of thousands of people globally. At the UN meeting, German Chancellor Angela Merkel backed Guterres' call for the IMF to consider an increased SDR allocation. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva proposed a new SDR allocation, akin to central bank printing new money at the start of the crisis, but the proposal has been blocked by the United States, the largest single IMF shareholder.
Drivers of intercity bus services in Colombia protested to demand the government let them return to work after 2 months of quarantine aimed at stopping the spread of the virus. The Andean country is starting to reopen its economy, but President Ivan Duque has warned that public transport via highways will remain off limits. According to Colombia's transport ministry, some 38,000 buses ferry passengers across the country's highways, accounting for over 50,000 jobs. Protesters waved red cloths, which have come to represent cries for help during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has infected more than 23,000 people and killed at least 776 in Colombia. At a protest near a bus station in Bogota, the capital, a spokesperson for the transport country, Omega, Edgar Gonzalez, said its national protest for intercity transport, noting that protesters have gone 2 months without income, has affected drivers' salaries and the sustainability of its business. Gonzalez called on the government to reopen bus routes with the implementation of biosecurity measures, including obligatory use of face masks for drivers and passengers and the frequent disinfecting of vehicles. He warned the government must allow buses to travel with a 70% capacity to cover operating costs and avoid raising ticket prices. Similar protests have taken place in cities including Medellin, Cali, Barranquilla, Bucaramanga, and Tunja.
This has been Business Review, your daily source for the most critical financial stories. Tune in next time for the latest financial news impacting the world economy.